Ugh, and 31 days of horror / Halloween keeps on a trucking. Day 18, still in the 1980s, and this time around we're looking at one of my guilty pleasure favorites. It's a film that I think is one of the superior horror sequels of the 1980s. I mean, it's not a legitimately great movie, I'm not saying that it is, but just as like an entertaining genre offering, I mean, this is really, really, really up there. It's called House 2, The Second Story, which is like the worst pun I've ever heard for any movie title. But hear me out, it's actually really, really entertaining. Okay, for those of you that missed House 1, this movie has absolutely nothing to do with it. I mean, seriously, it doesn't. They're completely independent. The first movie is about a Vietnam War veteran, it's like a Stephen King analog, who inherits a house and he gets tormented by, his ex-wife and his old drill sergeant is like monsters. I mean, it's a pretty, I don't want to say it, I thought it was pretty bad. I mean, I didn't really enjoy it. I thought it was really forced and not really worth going out of your way to see. House 2, on the other hand, oh my god, this movie is awesome. This is like one of the best bad movies I've ever seen. It's up there with Night of the Creeps. It's up there with The Story of Ricky. I mean, it's just superlative crap cinema. So what makes it work? Well, it works because it's basically Weekend at Bernie's, only the horror version, like the hardcore, well, not hardcore, I mean, it's basically what happens if you take the characters from Weekends at Bernie's and you put them in basically like any 1980s horror film. The characters here, they're like your standard 1980s yuppies. They move into a house and they're best buddies. And slowly but surely they begin to realize that this house they just bought has some secrets. Like the fact that, their grandpa, who's like 170 years old, is like still hanging out in the graveyard out back, And you talk about zombie performances, sort of a kind of a backhanded compliment to say that you're a good zombie actor. But you got to give all the props in the world to Royal Dano, who plays one of the best like undead characters ever in any movie. And he's up there with, Bub in Day of the Dead, as far as I'm concerned. Basically, I know this is really confusing with movies like that, because it's 1980s and cocaine, that explains everything. So yeah, the plot, like I was saying, so you got the grandpa, who's like this really old cowboy guy, and he's hanging out in the cemetery out back, and the kids that move in are like his relatives or his ancestors, and they start talking, and he tells them, you gotta be careful, because you open up the gateway to some like extra dimensional portal, and my old arch rival is like this skeletal cowboy, and he's still out there, and he wants this skull that I have, and if he gets it, he'll open the gates of hell. Really convoluted stuff, basic, supernatural 80s hokum. But the thing that makes this film stand out, outside the fact that the performances are really, really good, and the characters are way better fleshed out, they're not your standard throwaway, bimbos and jocks, is that more or less, like, each room in the house is kind of like a portal to another dimension. I mean, it's not fully fleshed out, but that's kind of what's going on. Like, there's this one part where they go into, like, the cabinet and end up in, like, this really weird, like, Jurassic World kind of place, like, primitive times, where you got, like, pro wrestler cavemen running around, beating them up. There's, like, a catfish monster that eats people. And there's stuff like a pterodactyl and this little, like, fusion caterpillar puppy. And then there's like another room where like they go behind the wall, and there's this scene just completely out of nowhere where just Jonathan Ratzenberger just shows up as an electrician and says, hey, you got a bunch of druids in the back here trying to do virgin sacrifices. They just have like this sword fight for no reason, completely out of nowhere. And that's not even like the most brain-breaking thing about this movie. The most brain-breaking thing about the movie is the part where like the doorbell rings, they open it up, and oh my god, it's Bill Maher. Bill Maher, politically incorrect and irreligious or religious or whatever the movie's called, just shows up playing like this really like snooty record producer, and you're just like, what is going on? So I mean, all this stuff, it's a complete muddle of a movie, and none of this stuff makes sense. But I mean, the acting is so much better than it has any right to be, and there's just such a spirit of funness to it. I mean, there's so many films from the era that try to be like really, sort of abrasive and distressing. But this one is just all about fun. It's a fun, goofy movie. And some of the special effects are pretty good. Like, there's some good claymation at the end when they have the final shootout. And I mean, I'm not saying it's a great movie or even a great genre movie, but oh my God, it's so entertaining. I mean, when you have a movie like this where you just watch it and you're just grinning from ear to ear throughout the entire production, I mean, how can you say anything bad about it? Now, like I said, this is kind of the same rule I have with Bad Taste. Objectively, it's not a great movie. I know that. I'm willing to admit that. And even as a genre film, there are far better and deserving films within the canon. That said, just for being what it is, for being an entertaining seasonal fare, I got to give this one very, very high marks. I'm going to give it 3.5 pieces of candy corn out of 4. It's that entertaining, it's that enjoyable. And if you haven't seen it before, you owe it to yourself. It's definitely superlative. Like I said earlier, superlative crap cinema from the best decade ever for crap cinema. Go see it, you won't be disappointed.